In this video, we're going to look at the structures and how we name alkanes. We're going to start with carbon, and carbon has 4 outer shell electrons, meaning that each carbon atom can form 4 covalent bonds. In a hydrocarbon, these bonds can either be with other carbon atoms or with hydrogen atoms. Now, if we do it with carbon atoms, then obviously that second carbon atom now also has another 3 spare electrons that we can use for bonding, so we can fill those up with hydrogen atoms like this. And we can build up a family of molecules using this system. We've got one with 1 carbon atom surrounded by 4 hydrogen atoms, one with 2 carbon atoms surrounded by 6 hydrogen atoms, and one with 3 carbon atoms surrounded by 8 hydrogen atoms. And these are the alkanes. These are the ones that you need to understand and be able to talk about and reproduce in exams. And it's the first 4 that you need to know about. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 carbon atoms. I've not shown the one with 4 carbon atoms here, but it basically has 10 hydrogen atoms surrounding it. We can carry on adding carbon atoms to this chain, making it longer and longer and longer. And you need to know about the existence of these long chain hydrocarbons, but you don't necessarily need to be able to name them or anything like that. We can also do things like make rings of carbon atoms, like this one. We can add other types of atoms, such as oxygen, and this makes an alcohol. And we can also have double bonds between carbon atoms, and that gives us a structure like this, which we will look at in future lessons. If we can't fit any more hydrogen atoms around the molecule, such as the one on the left here, it's said to be saturated. A saturated sponge is one that you can't get any more water into. A saturated hydrocarbon is one that you can't get any more hydrogen atoms into. On the right here, we've got a double bond between these 2 carbon atoms. Now, what we could do is you could break one of these double bonds, but still leave a bond between the 2 carbon atoms. We could break one of these bonds and we could fit 2 more hydrogen atoms into this molecule so that it would resemble this molecule on the left. So the one on the left is saturated, can't get any more hydrogen atoms into that molecule. The one on the right is unsaturated. We could fit in 2 more hydrogen atoms if we broke the bond. So you need to be able to name hydrocarbons. Specifically, you need to be able to name the first 4 alkanes. And it's a bit of a weird system of naming, but once you get used to it, it's straightforward. Basically, there are 2 parts to the name of a hydrocarbon. The first part of the name tells us how many carbon atoms there are in that chain. And the ones you need to know are for 1 carbon atom, it's meth or meth. For 2 carbon atoms, it's eth or eth, varies in pronunciation. For 3 carbon atoms, it's prop, and for 4 carbon atoms, it's bute. So if you see the name of a hydrocarbon and it starts with prop, you know that there's 3 carbon atoms in the chain in that molecule. So, for example, propanol has 3 carbon atoms in the chain. The naming system actually gets a little bit more straightforward after 4, but it's 1, 2, 3, and 4 that you need to know for GCSE. 5 is pent, like a pentagon. 6 is hex, like a hexagon. But the ones you need to know, meth, eth, prop, bute. The second part of the name tells us about how the bonds are arranged. So alkanes are saturated molecules, as we've discussed, and they have the suffix ane. So methane is an alkane, so it has all of its bonds saturated with hydrogen, and it's got 1 carbon atom. So methane, 1 carbon atom saturated with hydrogen. Ethane, 2 carbon atoms saturated with hydrogen. Propane, similarly 3 carbon atoms saturated with hydrogen. And butane, 4 carbon atoms saturated with hydrogen. Alkenes, which we'll learn about in a future lesson, are unsaturated and have the suffix ene. So propene will be unsaturated. Propane will be saturated. Alcohols, a little bit beyond the scope of this course, but alcohols contain an oxygen atom and they have the suffix anol. So propanol is an alcohol with 3 carbon atoms. So we've got a little bit of a summary here. These are the 4 that you need to be able to identify and talk about in exams. So we've got the name, methane. We've got the structure, 1 carbon atom with 4 hydrogen atoms around it. And we've got the shorthand version of writing this chemical formula, CH4. This means 1 carbon atom and 4 hydrogen atoms. We've also got a picture here of how the atoms are arranged in the molecule. So you can see it's a central carbon atom and there's a hydrogen atom at the corners of this tetrahedron. Ethane, a little bit more complicated, 2 carbon atoms. We've now got C2H6 because there's 2 carbon atoms and 6 hydrogen atoms. And this is arranged like this. Propane, and we've now got 3 carbon atoms and 8 hydrogen atoms, so C3H8. And this structure, and butane, C4H10, this structure, and this is what the molecule actually looks like. As you can see, each alkane adds 1 carbon atom and 2 hydrogen atoms to the previous one. So every time we go from methane to ethane or ethane to propane or so on, we've gained 1 carbon and 2 hydrogen atoms. We can actually generalize this formula. So this formula C2H6, we can generalize this into CnH2n plus 2. So N is the number of carbon atoms in the chain, and 2N plus 2 is the number of hydrogen atoms in the chain. So if we take propane, for example, C3H8, that would be C3, so N would equal 3. So on the other side, we've got H would be 2 times 3 plus 2. 2 3s is 6, plus 2 is 8. So this would be C3H8. And if we look across here at propane, that's what we have. So they all follow this generalized formula for alkanes. Hopefully that was helpful. I'll speak to you soon.